A girl, maybe 16 or 17, was in the swimming pool, her hands flailing helplessly. Her wheelchair lay on its side beside the pool. She was sinking fast. "Hey!" Tolu shouted. No one answered. No one came running. Without another thought, he grabbed the rough surface of the wall and began to climb. The concrete tore at his hands, scraping his feet. But he didn't stop. He pulled himself over the top, swung down, and ran toward the pool. The girl's head had gone under. Tolu jumped in. The cold water shocked his skin, but he pushed through it, diving deeper until he found her. He wrapped one arm around her waist and kicked upward, pulling her toward the light. She was unconscious. Her lips were pale, her body limp. He dragged her out and laid her on the tiles, water dripping from both of them. "Please, wake up," he whispered, pressing his palms gently on her chest like he had once seen an old roadside nurse do. "Please." After a few seconds, she gasped. Water poured from her mouth as she coughed, crying out weakly. Tolu let out a shaky breath. "You're safe," he said softly. "You're safe now." The sun had barely risen over the city when Tolu woke to the sound of car horns and barking dogs. He blinked against the early light, stretching on the hard concrete where he had slept. His blanket was nothing but a torn sack, his pillow a folded shirt. Around him, other street boys still slept under makeshift shelters, old billboards, cardboard, and tarps patched together with rope. Tolu sat up slowly. He lived behind the tall walls of the rich, in the corners and spaces no one cared about. To most, he was invisible, just another face among Lagos' forgotten children. But Tolu didn't complain. Life had taught him early that gratitude was stronger than hunger. He had no parents, no relatives. The only memory he carried from his early years was of a lullaby, a woman's soft voice singing as he drifted to sleep. That memory had kept him warm through the coldest nights. Every morning, he swept the streets for spare bottles, washed car windshields at traffic lights, and begged for food from security men who sometimes showed mercy. He didn't steal. He believed that even if the world forgot him, he shouldn't forget himself. That morning, hunger gnawed at him. He had eaten nothing since the day before. So, as the city stirred to life, he wandered into the quiet neighborhoods. There was one house he liked more than the others, the white mansion with a large mango tree standing beside the fence. The tree's branches stretched over the wall, heavy with fruit. Sometimes, a ripe mango would fall onto the street, and those were his lucky mornings. He sat beneath the tree, eyes half closed, listening to the soft hum of bees. Then, a sound. At first, it was faint. A splash. Then another. Then a desperate, frantic thrashing. Tolu's head jerked up. He stood quickly, peering through a small gap in the high fence. And what he saw made his heart stop. A girl, maybe 16 or 17, was in the swimming pool, her hands flailing helplessly. Her wheelchair lay on its side beside the pool. She was sinking fast. "Hey!" Tolu shouted. No one answered. No one came running. Without another thought, he grabbed the rough surface of the wall and began to climb. The concrete tore at his hands, scraping his feet. But he didn't stop. He pulled himself over the top, swung down, and ran toward the pool. The girl's head had gone under. Tolu jumped in. The cold water shocked his skin, but he pushed through it, diving deeper until he found her. He wrapped one arm around her waist and kicked upward, pulling her toward the light. She was unconscious. Her lips were pale, her body limp. He dragged her out and laid her on the tiles, water dripping from both of them. "Please, wake up," he whispered, pressing his palms gently on her chest like he had once seen an old roadside nurse do. "Please." After a few seconds, she gasped. Water poured from her mouth as she coughed, crying out weakly. Tolu let out a shaky breath. "You're safe," he said softly. "You're safe now." Her trembling eyes met his. She tried to speak, but only tears came out. Then, the sound of running feet. The door burst open. Guards stormed out, their boots pounding the ground. "Who are you?" "Leave the girl alone," one shouted, raising a baton. Tolu stood, raising his hands. I didn't hurt her, he said quickly. She was drowning, I just. Before he could finish, a man ran out, older, tall, and dressed in a white kaftan, his face pale with fear. Dami, he shouted, falling to his knees beside the girl. My daughter. He looked up at the boy, dripping wet, barefoot, shaking with exhaustion. What happened here? She fell in, Tolu said softly. I saw her from the road. I jumped the wall. For a long moment, the man stared at him, the silence thick with disbelief. Then he reached out and gripped the boy's shoulder, his voice cracking. You saved my child. He turned to the guards. Get him food, clothes, anything he needs. That man was Chief Odebanjo, one of the wealthiest men in the city, owner of construction companies and estates across Nigeria. To him, nothing mattered more than his daughter, Dami, his only surviving child. 2 years ago, a car accident had stolen her mother's life and taken away Dami's ability to walk. Since then, she had retreated into herself, quiet, distant, lost in grief. She rarely smiled, rarely spoke. She had become a shadow in her own home. But that evening, something remarkable happened. When she looked at the boy who had saved her, her lips trembled, and for the first time in years, Chief Odebanjo saw her smile. It was small, fragile, but real. And in that moment, something inside his heart, something long buried, began to stir again. Tolu was given clean clothes and a small room behind the mansion. At first, he refused. Sir, I can sleep outside, he said, bowing awkwardly. I'm used to it. But Chief Odebanjo shook his head. Nonsense. You'll stay here. You saved my child. This is your home now. The room was small but spotless, with a bed, a window, and a warm blanket. Tolu ran his hand across the sheets, hardly believing they were his. He lay there that first night, staring at the ceiling, smiling like a child who had just found heaven. Days turned into weeks, and Tolu began adjusting to this new world. He learned to eat with cutlery, though he often sneaked back to using his hands when no one watched. He learned to say, "Good morning, sir," and "thank you," more like the staff did. But despite the comfort, he remained humble. He swept the compound, helped in the kitchen, and thanked everyone, even the guards who once pointed guns at him. Dami, meanwhile, was healing slowly. At first, she spoke very little to him. She spent her days by her window, sketching the garden she couldn't walk into. Her wheelchair stayed parked by the balcony, where sunlight touched her face but not her heart. The staff treated her kindly, but with distance. They pitied her, not loved her. It was Tolu who broke that silence. He began visiting her each morning after chores. "Miss Dami," he'd say shyly. "Do you mind if I sit here?" She would shrug, and he would take it as a yes. He told her stories about street life, funny, sad, and wild. About an old man who sold roasted corn and told jokes that made everyone forget their hunger. About a stray dog that followed him everywhere, refusing to leave his side. About how, even on the streets, people shared the little they had. Dami listened quietly. Sometimes she laughed softly. Other times, she cried. One morning, as they watched the sunrise together, she said, "You talk about happiness like it's easy." Tolu smiled. "It is, Miss Dami. You just have to see it in small places." She studied him. "You sound like someone who's lost a lot." He nodded slowly. "I lost everything once. But I found peace when I stopped searching for pity." That line stayed with her for days. Gradually, she began to change. She laughed more. She started using her wheelchair more confidently. One afternoon, Tolu challenged her. "Let's race," he said, grinning. "You in your chair, me on foot. First to the mango tree wins." She laughed. "That's not fair." "It is if I run backward," he teased. They raced, and for the first time in years, Dami's laughter filled the compound, bright and alive. Chief Odebanjo watched from the balcony, tears in his eyes. He hadn't seen her this happy since before the accident. That night, he called Tolu to his study. Tolu, he said gently, you've given my daughter something I thought I'd lost, joy. I can never repay you. Tolu bowed his head. You already have, sir. You gave me a roof. The chief smiled. Still, you deserve more than that. But even as he spoke, a strange feeling tugged at his heart. There was something about the boy, his eyes, his voice, the tiny scar above his eyebrow. Something that felt painfully familiar. That night, unable to sleep, Chief Odebanjo went through an old photo album. There was a picture of his wife holding a small boy, barely 3 years old, smiling, a scar faintly visible on his leg. It couldn't be. But what if it was? He called his assistant in the morning. Find out everything about that boy, he said quietly. Where he came from. Who his parents were. Days later, the assistant returned, holding a file. The chief opened it, and froze. The boy had been found wandering alone 10 years ago near a village highway. He had been too young to explain who he was or where he came from. A charitable orphanage had taken him in, but he later ran away when conditions got unbearable. Chief Adebanjo's hands trembled as he read. His heart pounded. There was one more thing he needed to see, a scar. He asked Tolu to help him carry some flower pots that afternoon. As Tolu bent, the chief's eyes fell on his leg, a small, curved scar on the shin. His breath caught. That was the same scar his son had, the one he got from falling onto a broken flower pot when he was 2. The chief's voice trembled as he whispered, Dear God. He sent a hair sample for a DNA test that very evening. The wait felt eternal. The next morning, Dami was outside, watering flowers with Tolu's help. She laughed as he splashed her lightly with the hose. Chief Odebanjo watched them from the balcony, holding an envelope in his hand, the DNA results. He had opened it already. His legs had nearly given way. Result, 99.9% match. He could barely breathe. The boy who saved his daughter was his son. That evening, he called Tolu into his study. Tolu, he said quietly, can we talk for a moment? The boy nodded, wiping his hands nervously. Yes, sir. Chief Odebanjo gestured for him to sit. There's something I must tell you, something about who you really are. Tolu frowned. Sir. The chief reached for a small photograph on the table. It was old and faded. A woman smiled in it, holding a laughing toddler with the same eyes, the same scar. This was my wife, the chief said softly. And this was my son. Tolu's breath caught. Sir, what are you saying? The chief's voice trembled. My son was kidnapped 10 years ago. We searched everywhere, hospitals, villages, rivers, but no one ever found him. Until now. He stood, tears welling in his eyes. Tolu, you are that boy. You are my son? Silence. Tolu stared at the photo again, the woman's smile, the man's proud gaze. He felt something stir inside, something buried for years. Mama, he whispered, tears filling his eyes. The chief stepped forward and took his trembling hands. Yes. My son. You saved your sister's life, not knowing she was your own blood. Tolu broke down, sobbing. Chief Odebanjo pulled him close, holding him tightly. You are home now, he said. You were never forgotten. When Dami heard the truth, she cried too, tears of joy. You're my brother, she said, hugging him. You saved me twice, once from the water, and once from sadness. From that day, the mansion was never quiet again. Laughter returned. The halls that once echoed with grief now sang with love. The boy who once slept under bridges became the son of a billionaire, not because of luck, but because of destiny. And as the sun set behind the Odebanjo estate that evening, Chief Odebanjo stood by the balcony, watching his 2 children together, Dami laughing, Tolu smiling beside her. He whispered a prayer. For the son I lost, and the angel who found him.